Shehnaz Soni has been working for the last 6 years as a senior system engineer with NASA. She previously worked for over 20 years with Boeing as an avionics design engineer, project engineer, and a systems engineer. Currently, she's working on the Artemis Program to send humans back to the moon and to start a Mars colony. She's been inspired by the ideals of Star Trek. She is interested in being a quantum catalyst and also in how humanity will interact with extraterrestrial intelligence.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome, Shehnaz, to Exopolitics Today.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so excited about, unwinding part of our DNA in this whole evolution that we're going to go through in the next hour or so.
Well, you've got quite an incredible background, a professional background working with these top aerospace companies and with NASA. But the journey to get there was quite a difficult one. I mean, you're born in Pakistan, and so why don't you just explain to my audience what it was like as a woman or young girl trying to get an education in a very conservative Muslim country like Pakistan?
Yeah, that was the thing, that when I asked myself that why would I give myself such a challenge, like so many challenges at so many levels, I don't even know how to answer that question. But I do remember that when I became aware of my consciousness in Karachi, Pakistan, right away, I had more questions and no one was able to answer. Like all my questions were very much wanting to understand what consciousness is. So that beginning and then the very fact that being in a girl body and being in a patriarchal culture where my dad especially believed that the girl's life is in the kitchen, all of those understanding of where I was played a huge role in me becoming more and more rebellious as I was growing up and doing kind of things that I wanted to do in spite of the fact that it wasn't rewarded or it wasn't even encouraged. So I became like a valedictorian, partly because I was told not to go to school. So I kind of did everything at an extreme, but that was needed for me to fuel my human craft to come as far as I have come today. That to me was like a step number one, right? To give me the exact amount of thruster I needed to change my frequency and vibration to end up in LA, right? Like through the arranged marriage, even though the process was following the culture, but it was doing something that was more like a springboarding, right? Like I'm going from one extreme to another when I ended up in LA. And the very fact that when I came to LA, I did not have all the tools that you need to navigate life in LA. For example, knowing the language or knowing how to go from one place to another or even having enough money to afford your meal. So all of those things were completely like kind of on a negative for me. And then I had to change all of that to come to the point where I would become acceptable, green card holder, and then ultimately a citizen. That process itself had a journey of its own. And even going through the schooling and then getting the degree and getting my first job. So it was kind of like a Jacob's ladder, right? I was climbing the Jacob's ladder. I had to go through many, many different tests that I had laid out for me. And all of them were kind of very extreme because I had a goal. And in order to get there, I had to do things that I had never done before.
Well, I know you got into a Pakistan university, NED university, where you got to pursue your passion in rocketry. And then when you moved to the United States after the arranged marriage, you continued to pursue your education, even though you had a family, children, some young sons, and you then got a degree at the University of California at Irvine. So something was driving you to get these degrees, even though you're balancing moving to a new country, you're having a family. So what do you think it was that was driving you to get these degrees?
So I think the driver was my quest for understanding things that I did not understand and nobody was able to answer me. So I actually found myself almost like it's almost became my escape place. You know, like how you have to go somewhere where you can find yourself. The study became my sanctuary. Like for me, that was the one place where I felt like I can depend on me to expand my consciousness, right? So that was the driver that I didn't even know, but now when I look back at myself, like I always wanted to make sure that I would study as far as I could. And I even believe that, you know, growing up, like Muhammad Mustafa actually said that, you know, if you have a daughter and a son, then you should make sure that your daughter goes as far as she can possibly go even to China to study. So that actually was ingrained in my understanding, you know, going through the Islamic learning and teaching. And even though I did not see that as implemented by the people in the country, because that was my dichotomy, that the religion was actually all about telling you how to live with each other and Islam means peace. But it was a dichotomy that I saw the patriarchal culture as all about controlling out of fear, right? It was all about kind of opposite of expanding consciousness. And I think that I kind of felt that I had to keep doing what I thought was right, even though the whole world disagreed. And it almost became a pattern for me to continue on that route, which got me to where I am.
Well, you got to work with some pretty major aerospace companies after your degree in electrical engineering, and you worked at Hughes Aircraft for 3 years at El Segundo as a software engineer. And then after that, you worked for 20 years with the Boeing Aerospace company. And so, yeah, what was it like working in those two major aerospace companies?
Well, that was the thing that even my first job, you know, when I became an engineer and I was degreed with magna cum laude and all that good stuff. So I had a little bit of a choice, but I actually picked Hughes as my first job because I got other jobs, but I said no to them because I was looking to work on state-of-the-art technology. And when Hughes reached out to me, they were working on the Inmarsat phone, a phone that basically was a state-of-the-art technology. Remember, because this is 1995 I'm talking about. So cell phone wasn't that common. And that phone was actually, the customer was Martin Marietta in London. The whole thing intrigued me that I'm going to be working on a phone that's going to let us communicate even when we don't have the direct access to the cell tower, through the sky. So that to me was an interesting technology. And that's how I got into Hughes Aircraft. And then ultimately I joined Boeing. And working in the aerospace environment, one of the things that I learned was that you go to school to learn and get a degree. However, when you go to the company and work and implement the degree, the fact that you have learned to learn becomes more important than what you have learned.
Now, with Boeing, there's a advanced technology division, which people describe as Phantom Works. Did you ever hear of that? Did you have anything to do with that particular advanced technology division?
I had heard of it. I was familiar with it. I had colleagues working in it. I did not directly work in it myself.
I see. Okay. Well, I know you did work in something called the Future Combat System Army Program. And so, yeah, I'm very interested in that. I mean, what was the work you did with that particular program?
So, yeah, I was actually hired as a senior simulation engineer for that role. And the Future Combat System was an Army program that was stood up to make sure that all these different programs that are, in different mediums, right, like air, space, and underwater, they can communicate. So the entire program was all about communication and making sure that, because communication is the only way you can create that closed loop, right, where you can avail all your resources. So the entire program was all about interoperability.
Interesting, that emphasis on communication for warfighting. Now, I know you're aware of JP, this Army insider that I've been working with for quite a number of years now, since 2008, and he described some of the communication systems that are used in these covert programs, and he described in one particular program, he said that with the SpaceX system, or with Starlink, with the Starlink system, he says that something similar to that is used in the covert programs, especially on other planets. So I just wonder if that's something which is along the lines of this future combat system program that you worked on.
Yeah, so that part I don't know. So when you say covert program, means the programs that mean harm?
More like black programs, compartmentalized.
Got it. The programs that people are not aware of, right? Like general public are not aware of.
Yes.
Okay, so that means covert. So now that makes sense. And when you're talking about the Starlink, so you're talking about the Starlink that Elon Musk has, right? That is the communication you're talking about, right?
Well, the way JP described it, he says that he was taken on a mission to one of the moons of Jupiter called Ganymede, and he says around the moon of Jupiter, around Ganymede, was a satellite system very similar to Starlink, and that was used for kind of like communications for all of the military personnel that were in these different facilities there on Ganymede. I mean, that's what he says he was exposed to.
I mean, it makes sense. So to answer your prior question, I was definitely, I don't know the answer to that question because I wasn't involved to the level where I would know the protocol for the comm. And even if I would have, then I couldn't share with you anyway. So it kind of cancels each other out. What my involvement was to actually make sure that all of these programs communicate with each other. So that was a very big challenge. So the whole Future Combat System program, ultimately, I'm not sure where they truly landed because I worked there for a few years and then I left. But I do believe that the goal, I don't know if they were able to meet the goal. And if they did, then it's probably not a public knowledge, right? But then going back to what you're saying, having a comm system that is kind of, availing something that we are not necessarily using it day to day right now, especially when it comes to having to work with other planet, it seems to me that that has to be there, right? Because comm is the first step in creating something new as far as interaction goes with other beings or with other species. So I personally do believe that there is definitely a comm system that is now going to be shared, right, at that level. Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets connected with the very fact that how we perceive everything around us, because that to me interplays in how we communicate with something, right? Because if you really think about it, so what is your understanding of matter, right? How does matter come into formation? Because how you perceive matter affects what you perceive and how you interact with it and how you communicate with it, right? So now it's getting to the point where now we're getting into Twilight Zone, right? You see my point? Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets very interesting, because I believe that there's a dichotomy going on planet Earth, where even though we may have an 8 billion population, I'm not sure how much true population truly is tapped into expanding consciousness.
Yes, the consciousness factor is very important when it comes to using advanced technologies, and we will come back to that. But I just wanted to just go over a few more kind of elements from your professional life before we get into the kind of more the Twilight Zone, secret space program stuff. Now, I know you worked, or you've said that you worked on the International Space Station as a software engineer. So, can you say what you did with them, and in your work with the ISS, did you ever hear anything about any anomalies that were up there that the astronauts were trying to understand?
Okay, so International Space Station, my role working in the International Space Station initially was to basically I was hired as a software engineer. So I did a lot of coding in many different languages, including the machine language and Ada and assembly and Pascal and Fortran and all these languages to kind of make sure that one part of the space station communicates with the other part. So that was my initial role. And then I became a build integrator. So my role was to make sure that one computer communicates with the other computer. And then I became the test engineer. So then it was more like making sure that the command and control communicates with all the 14 computers, and then, everything. And we can pass 1553 messages back and forth and so forth. So I basically had many different roles while I was working for a space station for 5 years. And I learned the entire method to the point I became the lead who would lead the flight, because, the whole space station was built piece by piece, flight by flight. So we kind of did that. I was briefly part of the orbital, I was part of the team where when problem occurs with astronaut, then we would, help them solve it. So the problem would be more along the line that they're not able to follow the procedure that we've given to them to assemble one part with the other part. But I never necessarily heard anything that was as intriguing as you mentioned, like having an anomaly that they are not sure what to do with. It was more like that we were having, challenges in making sure we can finish the step-by-step instruction to complete the integration of different, flights.
Okay. Well, since 2018, you've been working as a scientist for NASA at the Huntsville, Alabama. I guess that's the Marshall Space Flight Center there, right? And
yes.
On the Artemis program for a moon landing. So, yeah, tell us, what is it that you are doing as part of this kind of Artemis project for the moon landing?
So I wanted to go a little backwards so people can understand why I ended up with this program. So 2018, when I got a job at NASA, my first job was that I was hired as a subject matter expert to help certify the software that Falcon 9 rocket had that was built by SpaceX. So that was my first job, actually. And I, for the first time, went to SpaceX and I saw the way they run the company. And it was so different and unique compared to all the other places I have been. So I got intrigued about their work ethic. I got intrigued about the product, and even the Falcon 9 rocket ultimately did do exactly what it claimed by being the taxi service, right? Going from space station back to Earth and so forth. So that kind of intrigued me about the SpaceX. And then the Artemis opportunity came where they were looking for someone to help write the system requirement document that we would ultimately give it to companies like SpaceX to make a rocket that lands on the moon. Then that kind of was my role, which is how I ended up entering into the Artemis program. And I have been working on this program for now about 4 years, and I've had many different roles. And right now, my role is becoming more of a person who manages all the products, that manages all the functional and performance requirement that makes the lander, which is the one that's going to go take the astronaut from the lunar orbit to the moon, to stay there for 1 week and perform all the experiment on the South Pole to ultimately expand our stay, from week to a month to longer and longer duration, to make that as a layover place to go to Mars. That is what Artemis program is currently built on, and it has many different missions and many different companies that gets involved as we keep on evolving into 1, 2, 3. So the only one we have flown so far is Artemis 1, which was flown a couple of years ago by the Space Launch System rocket, which is one of the heaviest rocket built by Boeing. But then now we have Starship, and we are getting there through that as well.
So I know that there have been studies that show that there are very big underground caverns on the moon. So in your work with NASA, have you come across or learned about these underground caverns as possible sites for building a moon base?
Not that I'm aware of. I have not heard anything like that. The only thing that I know is that, if we had a reason to select the site where we are going, and that reason was that we do believe that they do have the the ice water underneath the shackle and cradle, which opens the door for us to work with what starts something that enables us to create sustainable living by having a fuel and having a water and having opening the door for life to sustain itself without any external resources.
Well, another aspect of the Artemis program is the idea of colonizing Mars in the next 10 years. So, why don't you just tell us? I mean, how achievable is that goal with the Artemis program?
So the goal is achievable if once we go to the moon, of course, and if we can prove ourselves that we can colonize moon, then that becomes more and more achievable to colonize Mars, because ultimately we're doing something that we have never done before. Because going to moon already has a lot of challenges, and even surviving there on the moon has a lot of challenges. So if we can even learn to overcome them, and not only that we're overcoming it, we're actually working together with different pieces, because the entire lunar mission depends on working together at the very mega level, right? Which is why Artemis program is like being, going different countries and getting creating the partnership with them, is because a lot of unmanned vehicle that we're going to use is going to be heavily technologically evolved from all over the world. So basically, this is going to be bigger than International Space Station, right? Because International Space Station was more like USA was working with Russia and Italy and European Space Agency, all of these different players, and Japan, right? And it was great. But what we're going to do with Artemis is even way, way bigger than that. And because of that, I believe that if we can prove the concept that we can live in a place that is hostile, we can work together, and we can manage that type of frequency, right, on a planet, then it just makes it just proves the concept that we can go and do the same with some other planet, right? Because so that to me is the reason moon became more like a layover, just like International Space Station is a layover, right, between us and beyond. So it's kind of like we're just adding another step in the Jacob's ladder, so that way we can do what we're claimed to do.
Now, Elon Musk and President Trump, they had a conversation where Trump said that he was on board that with Musk's dream to actually send a starship to Mars, a manned starship to Mars by 2028. And so that this next Trump administration is going to be supporting, I guess this is that kind of Mars program or Mars aspect of the Artemis program, or is this something unique to SpaceX and Musk?
Based on what I know, if he wants to go to Mars by 2028, I don't know how we can do it with Artemis personally, like unless we really expedite it, because going through the moon was a different plan than going straight to Mars, right? And the thing is that I believe his ship is capable of going to Mars. So based on that, they can definitely change how they're going to do it, right? Like what are going to be the constituents that will get them there? Because right now, I mean, based on the original schedule, as you can see, right, we were supposed to land on the moon by September of this year. So we already missed the boat on that. And right now the schedule is being defined. So what I'm saying is that if you're going to do it using the Artemis, going through the moon, and if you can still make it to Mars in 2028, then they're going to have to really revamp the whole NASA. Like that's just the way I see it, right? Like you have to make some major priority changes to make that happen.
Right. Well, it does seem that Elon Musk is definitely someone who wants to push the envelope on space exploration and colonization, and other organizations, and NASA has a reputation, shall we say, of kind of slow walking everything. Everything gets delayed, and they're kind of like moving in small incremental steps. So so maybe it is just this is Musk's initiative. He's got the Donald Trump supporting that. So maybe this will be something that, that he is kind of like going to really push things forward a bit and go beyond whatever kind of program was, or whatever the parameters of the Artemis program. He's going to move that forward or just ignore it altogether.
No, you're absolutely right. And you know what the interesting thing is? It's almost like, when you have a private company, because for the most part, Elon Musk is a private company, right? And NASA is a government, right? So every time NASA needs a budget, they have to go to the Congress and convince them to give them a budget, right? And then depending on who's running the show and what the priority is for the Earth planet, it changes, right? So that to me is something that we have to keep in mind a little bit. But to me right now, the very fact that we have this convergence going on with Elon Musk and Donald Trump working together, so that to me is something that I don't think that it has ever happened in a history, right? Where we can have this type of close relationship with somebody who is kind of all about advancement of technology and us exploring space, working really kind of like side by side with the President of the United States of America. So to me, this convergence is something unique, and maybe that is what we all need to do something that we have never done before.
Okay. Now, you obviously have been working a lot, doing all of these different senior positions with Boeing and NASA and Hughes, and it's kind of more along the lines of kind of like the left brain activity, as you've been saying, as a kind of systems engineer. But your passion seems to be in you have a passion for quantum physics, kind of like exploring way out there concepts like quantum entanglement. And so, what is it that got you interested in these kind of more like esoteric topics in quantum physics, and how do you apply that to your kind of science profession?
Yeah, I think the main driver for me was that even like from the very childhood, I was always wondering about things that made no sense, like sky, the black hole, the dew. And my thinking was that there has to be a way to explain that with words, which is what led me to get into the whole scientific world, because I felt like that was the one place where we were doing things that was a little bit outside of the box, like we were trying to fly, or we're trying to, send the man to the moon. That to me was where I felt like I can get my answers. But when I wasn't getting my answers from science, I ended up going and actively pursuing the mystical knowledge, ancient wisdom. I went to the mystery school local here, and I learned every single thing they could offer. And I got to the point where Kabbalah was the last step. And they told me that you have learned everything and now you need to learn Kabbalah. And I said, okay, then where's the teacher? And when they said the teacher was old and she had been doing it, but now she's not able to do it, I learned under her wings. And then I did my own research. And then 6 months down the road, I taught Kabbalah myself, right? So my quest for understanding has always been very much like I wanted to. And then when I started understanding Kabbalah, I kept it in a spiritual box. But then what happened was that I started embodying Kabbalah. And as I was embodying it, I started understanding the relationship of time and light, the whole, and I started combining all the scientific laws that are only applied in a physical dimension. I started applying them in my life. And I started noticing that what Kabbalah is saying, which is a journey of light, is what quantum physics is saying, is a journey of light. It explains it, like how everything is constantly moving, right? And their motion affects how everything creates that pattern. And that pattern ultimately interacts with matter. And that collapse that we have, the electron collapsing and creating this imagery that our, brain actually interprets just the way we interpret watching television, and how this whole dance that we do continuously with the world actually is the projection of our consciousness, right? Through that tree of life, which is basically a subset of flower of life. So when I started connecting all these dots, and I started understanding that even the numerology of the Kabbalah connects with the physical constant in physics. Like it's very interesting how when you start seeing all this thing and it starts making a lot of sense, and then what happens is that you truly don't even need to explain it other than live it. So I kind of went through that whole dance and with life and everything. And because of this interconnection that I started finding it, I started weaving it, which is what I did in the book, The Quantum Being, where I basically is the embodiment of quantum physics through the ancient wisdom, which we actually carry within our DNA.
Fascinating that you were able to bring in this element of the Kabbalah into quantum physics, and this is, and quantum physics obviously is an aspect of the kind of work that you do, even though, I mean, as a professional rocket scientist, I mean, you're probably, quantum physics is more like a set of theories that may not directly apply to what you're doing, but in the future, when we're talking about things like superluminal travel, black holes, I mean, this is where all of these principles come in. So that must have been very exciting to find these connections between the kind of quantum physics and mysticism.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I 100% agree, because even like what we're doing and how we are going to the moon right now, and it seems very dense based on our understanding of technology. But to me, like, you tap into what you can, because ultimately you're tapping into what is beyond that by taking that one step in the Jacob's ladder, right? So you do what you can do to get where you need to get there. You see my point? Because when everything boils down to the physical dimension, it's always going to be a little bit way more dense than what you're visualizing in your spiritual dimension.
So you want to tell us about your book, The Quantum Being. Exactly what is it that you discuss in that?
So the quantum being to me is the answer to a question that how do we save ourselves from what's going to happen with humanity, with all the concerns that people have about, human versus AI, right? Or human versus transhumanism. All of that can be answered by realizing that the answer is going to lie within you. The quantum being, basically, so the human being is what we are. And I replace the word human with quantum, because when we understand that at the subatomic level, we're all the same, then that is what we all need to realize, that we are affecting each other because of the interconnection of the quantum field. And because we're affecting each other, we are going to have to work together to create the positive effect in our lives, right? The effect that's going to bring heaven on earth. That is the entire quest the quantum being is on, is that the journey to the light is journey within. And when you are ready to take that journey within, the quantum being provides you the map.
Now, you've described yourself as a quantum catalyst. So what is that?
So, I actually say that, and because I feel like that because I have always been a catalyst for my own drive to do what I've done, when I come in people's life, I feel like I kind of burst their pattern. So I become a catalyst. So like if you're somebody who's kind of stuck and you're about to you're on a crossroad and wondering where to go, if you interact with me, then the chances are very high that you are going to get that, so I become a catalyst for you. Like I'm going to move you where you will have more certainty to go where you are, because I believe that I carry that energy, and I have noticed that it comes with the price to have to go through a lot of adversity, but it has made me someone who can see things from a very different vantage point.
Now, with your colleagues at NASA, I mean, how receptive are they to these ideas, especially when it comes to quantum physics, consciousness? I mean, are they receptive at all to it, or are they all just kind of focused very much on the nuts and bolts of, getting a rocket to the moon as quickly as possible and efficiently as possible?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because there are multiple groups that I have encountered. So there's one group that's very much into religion, and so much into religion that they believe that if they read my book, it may transform them from their belief system. So they don't want to read my book. So that's the one school of thought. There is another school of thought where, and I was very happy about it, where I gave my books to some of the leaders at NASA as a gift. And one of the one who's in a very good position, she actually sent me this text that completely made my day, saying that she was blown away learning that what I'm capable of. I had another person who was also like working, whom I worked with on commercial crew program in very high position. And she came to me and she said that NASA has no idea who you are. Like, so that was a compliment, right? I even had one person who found me purely because of my social media, even though we work in the same building, but he found me through social media, through my book. And he was like so happy that I wrote the book, right? So those people are, maybe I can count them in my finger, right? Because there are like 3 people, let's say. But so that is there. Majority of them fall in a category where they feel like that I'm kind of a little out there.
Missions for particular dates, or they give names. I mean, just like the names Apollo and Artemis, these are all very symbolic. So did you kind of find any of that?
Yes, and I actually agree with that. Actually, what you just told me makes me feel good about it, because it makes a lot of sense that they already are using the ancient wisdom towards manifestation. And the very fact that the Apollo name was, so Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. And Apollo is when we send the man to the moon. And in this Artemis mission, it's all about women walking on the moon first. So you see the twin sister, twin brother, and the Greek philosophy. So it's interesting, even like the name of the ships, by the way. And one thing that I was very intrigued when I went to SpaceX was that I personally believe that people, I mean, Elon Musk and even Von Braun here in Huntsville, they were connected. They were connected with the higher power, right? They were tapping into the quantum field, and they were connected to the point where they were getting the recipe of what needed to be done to advance the human species. I believe that that was done through that channeled messages, that because we're all channeling all the time, and that is how we get our information. But going back to what you were saying, I was very intrigued when I went to SpaceX, because even the rocket, where the rocket gets manufactured, the name of the street was Number 1 Rocket Road, right? I mean, you see how like he was using numbers, he was using the name. He was already saying that his rocket will be number 1 just by building it on a street with the name like that. That to me is a very smart way of manifesting, because that's what I teach in my quantum manifestation class, is that when you want to manifest something, you lay out, you use all your faculties, right? So the symbols, like even the engine design, were matching the flower of life pattern. So there are a lot of things that I notice, even the names, right? Like dragon, all these names that are used are completely from that aspect of mysticism and magic.
That kind of mysticism, magic, that's kind of very interesting when it comes to the Artemis program and the moon, because as I recall, prior to Donald Trump coming to power in his first term, the plan to return to the moon was called the Orion program, if I'm correct. And maybe you can correct me if I am wrong. But then under Donald Trump, it was changed to the Artemis program. And in Greek mythology, Orion, he was this kind of male brute, typical alpha male, a rapist, that sort of thing. Whereas Artemis was the huntress, and she was the one that slayed Orion. So, you kind of get the images of this occult battle between light and dark with the Artemis program. So, I mean, does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't know that part about Orion, but the funny thing is Orion is the capsule the astronaut is going to reside in, and basically it's going to be launched by the Space Launch System rocket to meet the Starship on the lunar orbit. And then the astronaut will move from the Orion capsule to the Starship on the lunar orbit, and then they'll go down to the south side of the moon, right? So it's interesting that Orion is involved in the mission, both the Artemis 2 and Artemis 3 that's coming up. So the fact that you said that according to that mythology, the Artemis ends up slaying the Orion. So here, it's an interesting story, because Orion does represent a lot of different energies, right? Because even the Orion belt we see up in the sky.
So let's shift now to the UFO issue, or how it's called now in the kind of mainstream or legacy media, the UAP issue. And so this is a phenomenon that is now being accepted more in the U.S. Congress and the Pentagon, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. They're now talking about UFOs, and this all kind of took off in 2017 when the New York Times published a story focusing on this Tic Tac UFO incident that dates back to 2004 with the USS Nimitz. So, what do you think is going on with the UFO issue becoming more a kind of mainstream issue that is now being discussed in official bodies?
So I think that, so to me, like, I think the consciousness level is getting enhanced. So people have been experiencing the UFO/UAP for decades. Because even in this town, Huntsville, where I live, I was like blown away when I would start meeting people and they would tell me that the Mel Gibson's movie, remember The Sign? That movie happened with people who were living here, like just an hour away from me. And all of these people, like multiple people came and said that they've experienced these things. And so I was actually very surprised to know that when I came to Huntsville, is that people were more sharing their personal stories to me. And even at work, so because the culture is a little bit different here, I started feeling that because when I was in a larger city like LA and Houston, I would not get like people to say that. So there is something about when you live in a place where there's less human, it seems like you end up experiencing these things more, partly because it's a different type of frequency and vibration, right? Because if you think about it, it's kind of like, everything boils down to the frequency and vibration. And to me, these UFO, UAP are representing something that is beyond our understanding of the 3D world. But the reason is that we have limited ourselves in thinking that we are the only intelligent being out here in the world or in the cosmos. And that to me is a very, very limiting belief because personally, I mean, of course, I don't believe in that because I wouldn't be working in space exploration, right? So.
No, you believe that the NASA or the government have long ago identified the true origin of the UFOs. And so if we just put up that picture, Jazz, of the Tic Tac UFO, and that the UFO issue actually is known to select people or organizations within government or NASA, and that the UAP issue or the unidentified flying object label, that they're being used just to make it appear that they don't know what they are, but that officially it is known what they are.
That makes sense, right? And the very fact that they changed the acronym from UFO to UAP means that to some extent that is an acknowledgement of what you just said, right? Because now we're saying unmanned aerial phenomena. So that's a way better name than the unidentified flying object, right?
Okay.
Actually,
right.
I want to confirm, what is exactly U part of the UAP stand for? Is it unidentified?
Yeah, unidentified. It's unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Okay, so then I agree with you that there are still basically things unidentified, and I do believe that definitely we have to have some sort of identification of these things. It makes no sense for us at the level that may not be exposed to the public.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I think that there is this element in government which knows what these are, but they are pretending that they're unidentified. So this brings me to this kind of like consensus within the legacy media, within the US Congress, this new office that was set up, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in the Pentagon, that the UAP issue is a national security threat. So that to me is it's a disturbing pattern, because it's like for decades the UFO issue was dismissed as like a joke and not worthy of serious attention. And I actually remember I was actually working at a university, American University in Washington, D.C. And when I got interested in the UFO issue and that this was an important national security issue. I mean, I was told that UFOs did not belong in a university, and I was kicked out. And now we're being told it's a 180. Now we're being told that UFOs are an important national security threat, and that you've got the Pentagon and Congress and the legacy media, and you have this AARO office, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, being set up. So why do you think they're doing that? Is this a setup for something? I don't know if you've heard of the false flag alien event. I mean, is that what they're setting us up for?
Well, I think that like the very fact that, this whole thing is happening for all these, and this is of course my personal opinion, right? Because I truly am not representing any organization here. I'm representing myself. And what I'm saying is that based on everything that I have seen in this world since I've been into my consciousness, and the very fact that there are things that are not very well explained, like UFO/UAP, or even discredited people who don't, who talk about things that are unexplainable, kind of connects to the fact that not everything is what it seems to be, right? Because we have, and that is where the evolution takes place as well, that we kind of keep unveiling the part of ourselves that we haven't seen before. And that to me is the definition of evolution. And what I'm saying is that I agree that there has been things hidden, and it's done for a reason that maybe we may not agree with that, but it's a reason that somebody else agrees with it, or the power to be that agrees with it. But then I say that the power we seek is the power within, because universe is not outside of ourselves, right? So when I start looking at it from that spiritual perspective, that everything we're experiencing is partly because we want to experience it that way, then we have to take a little bit of responsibility for all the things that are hidden from us, whether we give the power to the government or give the power to, somebody else. So I kind of say that maybe we are not really ready to truly understand everything that's hidden in our closet. You see my point? Like I'm saying, let's embody this and bring it back to ourselves, because that's what all the teaching that I have given and experienced has brought me to where I am. So I say that we as a humanity, we all have to get ready. And I believe we're getting more ready now than we were ready before. Because the fact that we have this type of transparency, that we even had what happened on November 13, right? Now that was something that doesn't happen every day. So that means that we are getting ready to keep on unveiling these layers, hidden layers. And the more and more people become ready to embrace what is really true, I believe that it's going to unwind itself. But we have to take a little bit of responsibility that partly we haven't experienced it is because we are not ready to experience it. Like how transparent are we that we want everybody else to be transparent, including the government?
Okay, that's a very important point there, that it's not a matter of just pointing the finger at government or different agencies or secret organizations saying, oh, no, these guys have been covering this all up from us for decades. That in fact, there's an important element of this is our consciousness as a collective, that we as a collective are not ready. We're not prepared for this. And so there's more work that needs to be done to get ourselves ready for this, and rather than just blaming governments and say, well, they're not being truthful and they're not being transparent, that in a way we haven't done the work to prepare ourselves, prepare our communities, and prepare the collective consciousness for this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think there's been a lot of kind of development of that, in terms of you have Tucker Carlson, you have Joe Rogan. I mean, all of these major podcasters, and I imagine the same thing is happening in non-English speaking countries, where all of a sudden major podcasters are talking about UFOs and talking about extraterrestrials. And so that seems to be getting us ready for this. Well, I know you believe, or you have stated, that extraterrestrials have been visiting us for millennia. So yeah, you want to just explain why you think that has been going on for so long?
So yeah, based on my understanding and even based on my personal experience, I believe that they, because they are kind of part of us and we are part of them. Actually, one of the scientific article that was published, I think under the WOO signal. So it's like a WOO, if anybody wants to search it on a Google. It actually claims that the non-identified DNA that we have, that we call junk DNA, actually is the DNA that carries the signature of the extraterrestrial within us. So based on that understanding, they are part of us and we are part of them, because everything that we experience, remember, is partly a projection of our consciousness. And also I actually always believe that they have always been here before even we came into existence. That just has been my belief based on my own intuition and based on how I feel. I felt their presence, like at times. And as I said, that scientifically the blue signal kind of does prove that point that I'm saying. And to me, our belief does impact our experiences. So it kind of gets into a little bit of a chicken or egg thing.
Well, I know that there has been a lot of literature that has come out about this ancient genetic engineering by extraterrestrials or the gods in ancient Sumer. I mean, there were a lot of cuneiform texts that describe something similar to genetic engineering. So, where do you stand on that? Do you think that it's possible, or do you believe that humanity was genetically engineered by ancient extraterrestrial visitors or gods?
Yeah, I definitely believe that as a possibility, kind of evolutionary possibility in many ways. I personally believe that for us, like, how like some people say that our DNA was tinkered to the point where we're not really availing all the attributes of our DNA. I actually believe that, like, physically, like, we have everything that we really need. Our biggest challenge has been not recognizing the fact that we're more than physical. And that is what has created a lot of dichotomy, because majority of the people believe that what they see in the material world is all there is. And because of that, they get so attached to the material world that they're willing to do anything and everything, to the point where it creates so much disharmony, right, among us. But when you expand that point of view from being so material into realizing, which is what Kabbalah and quantum physics explains, is that everything that comes into material form, it comes from the dark matter. It comes from the unmanifested form. It comes from what is hidden to you. It comes from your subconscious mind. So when you understand that interplay, right, between your subconscious and conscious, and you and the universe, and you and the consciousness, and the very fact that you are pretty much in this video game or Hunger Game, playing with everything that you need to play to process your own self, then it kind of becomes very interesting to understand the origin of our history and origin of our DNA and what we can do. So to me, like it's a very interesting thing, but I believe that we are capable of becoming whom we want to be. But the first step is believing in it. And that step is purely done with intent, without having to biologically change ourselves.
What do you think is the connection between extraterrestrial visitors, ancient extraterrestrial visitors, and the gods? If we're talking about the Greek gods, the Norse gods, the Vedic gods, are we talking about different types of extraterrestrial visitors? So what do you think that connection is?
So to me, like, I believe, like, so let me explain my definition of God, and then I'll explain that. So my definition of God is that God is kind of source. God is pretty much like when everybody is one. So that to me is a representation of God. And I believe that we're all made in an image of God, right? Which means that you are part of the piece of the puzzle. Michael, I'm part of the piece of the puzzle, right? Everybody's part of the piece of the puzzle. So therefore we all come together and we become God as unity. And that includes everything, all in existence. So based on that belief system that I carry, I believe that, of course, if the extraterrestrial or star beings or whatever other names we have for them, or our future self, when they came and impressed the primitive people, and if they started worshiping them, thinking that they're God, then that is a possibility.
Well, so, when we're talking about these different gods, with the small g, whether we're talking about Apollo, whether we're talking about Horus from Egypt, whether we're talking about Enki from Sumer. I mean, are we just talking about highly evolved extraterrestrials with kind of like advanced consciousness that maybe have a deeper recognition of the fractal nature of who they are?
I think that it makes sense based on what you're saying, because if you think about extraterrestrial just as a word, right, what does it mean? It means somebody who comes from beyond Earth. Would you agree? Would you agree that that's what it means as a definition, right? That somebody is coming from somewhere else. And the very interesting thing is, based on that definition, all of us are ETs, because I believe that we are also not from Earth.
Well, yes, I think. I think it's an interesting question of our consciousness incarnating into these physical bodies. I mean, these bodies, we might consider them to be like avatars, and our consciousness comes in and out, and you have reincarnation and so forth. But is the difference between us and these gods is that these gods, their avatar bodies, rather than living for 70 years, 80 years, they live for 10,000 or 30,000 years. That Apollo or Horus and all of that their avatar bodies are like 30,000, 100,000 years old. And so, is that the difference between us and extraterrestrials, or these gods?
Right, exactly. So because it's interesting, because when you really think about it, that people are very much attached on living forever, and that attachment makes us put somebody on a higher pedestal when they are able to master that art of living for a longer time than we do, right? And then maybe we categorize them and put them on a certain category, that they're gods or they're beyond us. But to me, I think that is an interesting thing, because when you understand that you are actually technically immortal at the soul level, right? Because you're just transforming from one form to another based on the law of conservation of energy, then truly, like, to me, my quest is more like to becoming a Q in the Star Trek, right? Mark, you know what I'm talking about, right? Because that means that you can be pretty much you can be anywhere, so you're teleporting, but you can be anything. So that, to me, pretty much gives you all the power of having fun with any kind of playground you want to create in your life. And that, to me, becomes an ultimate quest for people to have that type of choices, right? Where you can navigate life like that. So I guess what I'm saying is that I question the question, which is why I call myself a quantum catalyst. So I'm actually going to ask you a question, Michael, is that with all the knowledge that you have about the extraterrestrial or secret space program or all the things that's happening, that's not mainstream, and people experience it, but it's not accepted by mainstream. Not only that, it's not accepted by mainstream, it's actually discouraged by mainstream, to the point where people like JP have to worry about losing their jobs. That to me, that narrative is very kind of negative, and I agree with you 100%. And what I believe is that narrative is going to dissipate. But what is going to help us dissipate, which is what I want to get to, is that if we start opening the door to realizing that it is the part of us that we are wanting to understand. You see my point? Like, when we treat it like it's something very separate from us, something that's very hidden from us, something that we have no control over, then the power we seek is the power within. So what I'm saying is that if you bring that control back, take tiny bit responsibility of our contribution to this challenge, what's going to happen is we're going to actually unveil that, because we meet what we are seeking to meet at the higher frequencies and at the higher dimensions. And as we are evolving in consciousness, we're going to have no question about all of these gods / ETs, that how are they working together, right? Because ultimately what they represent some power that we believe that we don't have. Right?
That's a very interesting question, because I think these extraterrestrials, these gods, are powers that the national security establishment are totally freaking out over, trying to deal with them. Because if you look at people who typically rise to leadership positions within these national security programs that get to specialize in kind of retrieval of downed extraterrestrial spacecraft and so forth. I mean, these are people who kind of tend to be more left brain. And for them, it's like, oh, well, these are extraterrestrials, and they want to try and kind of understand the technologies and try and reverse engineer it, because for them that represents power. And but on the other hand, you have these gods, and I think they're a separate category, because I think on the one hand, you have these extraterrestrials, whether they're from the Pleiades or from Andromeda or from Tau Ceti, they can live 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 5,000 years. But the gods, these are extraterrestrials who somehow have understood or developed longevity to the extent that they can live for 30, 50, 100,000 years. And I think that some of them allow themselves to be described as gods. And I think that the national security establishment are freaking out over them, because it's like, well, how do you deal with these beings who, from our perspective, are kind of like immortal, almost immortal? I mean, this is like in Tom DeLonge. He wrote, he's the rock star. He wrote or co-authored a series of books with Peter Lavender called Secret Machines, and their conclusion was it's the gods. I mean, it's all about the gods. It's not the ETs. The ETs are kind of a lesser category. It's the gods who are the ones that they're freaking out over, because it's like, how do we deal with these beings? They're masters of consciousness and masters of really advanced, highly evolved technologies. So yeah, so that, I don't know if that's answering your question or just raising more questions.
It's raising definitely more questions. And if that's what you're saying, because it's something that is a little bit new in my understanding, but what I would say is that, because so if I use, let me just give this small attempt to see if we can make sense out of it. If I use quantum physics, and if I use the fact that everything we interact with is because of our frequency and vibration. So at the end of the day, if you're interacting with something like gods, first of all, if their frequency is very different than ours, then we are not going to be able to interact with them. And if you're able to interact with them, then hopefully it's in a higher frequency where it won't be a problem that they are so powerful. You see my point? I'm trying to make sense out of it, because at the end of the day, how does anything affect us is only when we are able to interact with it.
Yes, interacting with it is very important. And this kind of brings up the other element as well. Things we're talking about extraterrestrials, we're talking about gods. There's also the demons or the demonic, and these seem to be some kind of interdimensional being that seek receptive souls, or that they come in and they possess bodies, that they come in and take over a body, and that person that inhabited that body is now being taken over involuntarily by this demonic entity that does all sorts of things. So, and we have examples of that throughout history, or many religious texts talk about demons. So, that's also part of the equation, that those that are managing the extraterrestrial phenomenon and the return of the gods. So, how do they deal with these demonic entities that seem to come from some other dimension and will take over, weak-minded individuals to just wreak havoc on our planet?
Right. No, that makes sense. And I agree with that when you said weak-minded individual, because, we are in the frequency war, right? And when your frequency and vibration, that's why misery loves company, right? When you are in a challenging situation, more problem happens to you, right? So that quest, we are kind of all on in our own way, whether it ends up looking like a demon or looks like a big giant tax you have to pay. You see my point? It looks different depending on which timeline you're choosing and how you want to interact with matter. Because to me, this is a different form of matter. And I know that some people have a very specific definition for demonic, right? So yeah, I'm not saying I agree with that, that is the interaction that we are continuously having to manage based on our own choices. But what I'm saying is I bring it back to everybody to take that individual responsibility, that how do you show up so that you run into interactions that helps you choose the timeline, that helps you evolve and expand and helps you feel good about being here, right? Because it's pretty obvious that we all have dealt with a lot of challenges that has not made us feel good. And even everything that you have learned in your research and whatever little I know, there's a lot of challenges we have. But then we come back to ourselves and say that what am I willing to do to make sure that I at least contribute to the part where I'm interacting with energies and frequencies and consciousness that makes me feel that I'm expanding and not contracting, right? In spite of the fact that there's a lot more I don't know. But then whatever little I know, I want to take power within that, right? And that's pretty much where I usually go, mainly because I feel that helps me make sense out of things a little bit better, right? Because when we stay on the path where there's a lot of information out there, because even when you started talking about demonic, I had to bring up the jinn, because in Quran, in the Holy Quran, there's a reference to the jinn, right? And I'm sure, Michael, you may know about them, that they can be categorized as anything. They can be categorized as extraterrestrial. They can be categorized as, I don't know if they can be categorized as gods based on your definition, but I'm trying to understand that they're mentioned all over the Holy Quran, and they fall in a category where they can be good or they can be very bad.
So this is where I think the work that you've done or what you were describing becomes very important, that, you know, we need to know who we are. We need to do that inner work, connect with who we truly are. I mean, you studied the Kabbalah. I mean, you've used quantum physics and quantum entanglement to kind of like make that breakthrough, to kind of like get that deeper understanding of who you are. And I think that's part of all our journey, to be able to understand this wider reality. Because I think what's coming is this tsunami wave of, like, you know, extraterrestrials, the gods, return of the gods, the kind of incursion of these demonic entities. All of that is coming. And I mean, it's been here to a certain extent, but I think our collective consciousness is rising, and the people who are going to be able to cope with all of that are the ones that have done that inner work. And the ones that haven't done that inner work, they're going to be swept away.
Exactly. No, I agree with you, which is why I'm saying that if you can all at least get ready for whatever is to coming, right? And get ready by doing all the house cleaning that we can do, right? Like make sure that your house is good, your relationship with all the people that is close to you, they're all, you know, you process them properly. Because at the end of the day, we should do that all the time, right? Because we are truly here to evolve. And to me, the evolution requires us to integrate everybody that comes in our energy field, right? In any form, whether it's a human or whether it's gods. So.
Right. So, I mean, do you believe that we are kind of like in this unique place and time where there are new frequencies coming into our plane of reality that is driving us forward collectively to kind of like engage with, you know, things that have been, you know, I mean, you mentioned that we weren't ready before, but there have been these new frequencies have come into our plane of reality that are forcing us to deal with this. Like now, all of a sudden, you've got Congress and the Pentagon saying, oh yeah, UFOs are real. They're a national security issue. People need to engage. Whereas before, people could just stick their heads in the sand and forget about it. Now they're being told, no, you've got to understand this. It's important. So is this all being driven by these kind of new frequencies? You know, what is driving that? Do you have any idea as to what it is that's kind of driving these bigger changes at the macro level in our civilization?
So people like you and me who already believed in it from the day one we came into existence, we have created this 100 monkey effect now, where everybody who was even like, you know, people are choosing sides, whether you want to be NPC or whether you want to really fully do what your excitement and your calling is, right? Like, are you willing to do the work for what you believe in? And yes, so to me, like right now, this tsunami has come where people are waking up. Like all the people who are kind of like on a crossroad, they're actually choosing sides. So it's actually a very good time for us to actually see the result of the everything that we already believed in, right? So we believed in it. We didn't see it in this physical reality, but we believed in it partly because it was part of our DNA. And now we're seeing it. And I actually wanted to bring this little visual for everybody here. Is like if you have watched the movie Free Guy, right? So the Free Guy is a movie where, remember, the character that is not even human, it's AI, ends up changing one thing, and it ends up changing one thing, and it creates a whole different holographic fractal pattern through which it becomes the hero. It becomes someone who basically represents the expansion of consciousness.
And the name of that movie was Free Guy?
Yeah, Free Guy. It's a great movie for anyone who hasn't watched it. It's Ryan Reynolds' movie. And basically the movie is showing somebody who is like living a Groundhog Day, because it is kind of living like an NPC character. And then suddenly, like, it has this very set schedule where it wakes up in the morning and drinks its very particular coffee. It goes to work. It has to wear certain clothing. And then one day he decides he wants to choose a different type of coffee. And then he puts himself on this spin where he keeps on choosing different things. And he starts realizing he starts creating a whole different algorithm by making certain changes. And that starts creating something that was beyond anybody's control, because he was a character initially. He wasn't meant to be a sentient character, but he ends up doing things that ends up making him a sentient character. So it's a very good movie because it actually shows all the people who have been living Groundhog Day, and now they are tuning into your channel, let's say, right? They're tuning into your channel and they are saying, I want to see what else is out there, right? And they're asking questions. These people, when you start asking questions and you do one thing different, you change one thing, you change everything. That's basically quantum physics 101, because what it says is that when you look at the electron, you are changing the electron. You're changing what it can do because it acts differently when you look at it, right? So that is what happens when people start changing one thing. It creates that cascading effect. And because of that, I believe that within the next 10 years, we're definitely going to be in Mars, and we're going to have a lot of cross-pollination going on with planets, right? Like at a planetary level, right? Because we're going to become that species that Earth is not going to be the only base. And that's where we're going. And that's where the expansion is at this point in this physical reality, is for us to go that far.
Well, this takes me to the Star Trek future. I know you've talked quite a bit about how the Star Trek, the themes, the movies, the series has inspired a lot of people within NASA and yourself. So do you feel that somehow this Star Trek franchise has seeded within the collective consciousness a future that is actually coming, that we are collectively manifesting?
Yes, 100% we are manifesting it, because heaven on earth looks different from different people's perspective. People who are sci-fi like me, or scientific mind like me, probably would use Star Trek as a way to gauge that future, because the ultimate goal is that everybody gets to do what they want to do without having to worry about the basic things in life like food, clothing, and shelter, right? That to me is what Star Trek depicts, is that everybody is doing what they want to do and they are not attached to how much money they're going to make and how they're going to pay the bill, right? And that to me is what everybody needs to strive for. And we all have to keep on doing the work towards it. And ultimately, the entire system and the entire country is going to match to it.
Well, I've written a book called Space Force, Our Star Trek Future. And in there, I talk about some information that I got from my research, that the idea of Star Trek that emanated, of course, people understand Gene Roddenberry was the creator, but that he actually got a lot of his ideas from the movie set or from the stage set of The Outer Limits that was created by Leslie Stevens the fourth. And the bottom line is that Leslie Stevens IV was the son of a vice admiral that was in charge of a Navy-run secret space program. And so my hypothesis, and I'm not the only one who have said this, is that the Star Trek series that was envisaged by Gene Roddenberry was not his creation. He or Leslie Stevens was taken into the future through some kind of temporal technology. They got to see what humanity would become, and they brought that idea back, and then they came up with the series. So it's suggesting that Star Trek is not something that's just a product of the imagination. It's from the future.
Right. No, that makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense, which is why they've done such a good job in making it so, it talks about all of these things that are very, we ended up experiencing it, right? I mean, the cell phone right now, right? That was already shown in the old Star Trek, right? As a device that was used for communication. And even the screens that they would show, it kept getting thinner and thinner. So they were kind of showing us the evolution of our technology through Star Trek. So no, I actually believe that because there's a different school of thoughts on how Gene Roddenberry got his information. Like you said, what you said is one, I didn't know about that, but that makes sense. But the other one I learned from somebody else saying that he was given this information through channeling, right? So whatever the source is, whether it was channeled, whether he took it from Outer Limit, or whether they physically went to a place, right, where they were shown what the world is, all of that basically suggests that they were deliberately so that was the goal, was for the humanity to see it, which is so I kind of have sensed that about science fiction, is that science fiction is kind of projecting us the timeline, right, that we already existed in other dimensions.
Yes, I think that's a very important thing, that when it comes to timelines and temporal mechanics, that things are a lot more fluid than we think.
Exactly. And when you quantum entangle yourself with other dimensions, then you create a wormhole, right? And when you do that, then you can access all of these different dimensions at will, which is how you can be everywhere all at once.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I remember reading the channeled work of Jane Roberts, Seth Speaks, and in that she talked, or Seth was the being that was being channeled, and he talked about the importance of connecting with your future self. So I've done that. I don't know if it's a mind experiment, but I've done it, and I swear I can feel there's a part of me, or I can feel or connect with my future self on the other side of disclosure, and that future self is like living in this Star Trek society, and that future me is interacting with the present me and helping me in kind of like making choices to manifest that future society, that Star Trek future.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And I'm so glad that you are actively doing it, because I actually had to use my version that was healthy when I was very, very unhealthy and going through like almost near-death story of my own and very much in pain in 2019. I actually did this where I had activated my avatar so I can interact with the one that was very healthy and happy, because then she ended up making sure that I would get up from the bed and I would do all the things I had to do. So it was just me, myself, and I. But I had figured out how to get myself to do things that was very hard when you are by yourself.
I think it's very important to be able to work with our consciousness. I totally agree with you that, a lot of the answers we need and the guidance we need is going within. I totally think that's important, especially when it comes to embracing what's coming. So people, where do people go to learn more about you, to buy your book or find out anything that you're doing in the future?
So basically, my website is my first name and last name with no space.com. And my book is a great way to get to know me because I put my heart and soul in my book. Everything that I learned ever, it's in my book. And I believe that it helps you understand from both scientific, spiritual, and personal vantage point, all the concepts that I believe can help us do the part that we need to do. So the power we seek is the power within.
Well, thank you so much, Shehnaz, for being on Exopolitics Today.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.